There is a force beneath everything that breathes, an invisible pulse that drives the blood through every vein, that compels the tree to rise from the soil, that urges the lion to hunt and the human being to dream. Nietzsche called it the will to power. It is not a philosophy of comfort. It is not about survival, nor morality, nor peace. It is the fire that moves through the universe, demanding growth, transformation, and self-overcoming. It is life itself burning to become something more. For Nietzsche, life was not a passive existence to be endured, but a battlefield of creation and destruction. Everything that lives strives not merely to persist, but to expand, to impose its form upon the world, to assert its strength against resistance. Even the weakest creature seeks in its own way to dominate its surroundings, to shape its reality according to its will. That is not evil, that is nature. To live is to will, and to will is to seek power. But what did Nietzsche mean by power? Not domination in the political sense, not the lust for control that tyrants worship. The will to power is not about conquering others. It is about conquering yourself. It is the inner force that drives you to rise above what you were yesterday. It is the hunger to perfect your strength, your mind, your art, your being. The will to power is the will to become, to reach beyond your limits and impose your own meaning on a meaningless world. Nietzsche looked at the world of his time, the 19th century, a Europe drunk on morality and science, and saw a great sickness spreading. The death of God had left humanity adrift, clinging to old values that no longer gave life meaning. People sought comfort in equality, in safety in the illusion of progress. But Nietzsche saw decay beneath it all. He saw a civilization that feared suffering, feared struggle, feared power itself. And he warned, when man forgets his will to power, he becomes weak. He becomes resentful. He becomes small. In Nietzsche's eyes, this sickness of weakness had a name: slave morality. It was the morality of those who could not create, who could not rise, who could not face the chaos of existence. So they called their weakness virtue. They turned humility into holiness, obedience into goodness, submission into morality. But for Nietzsche, this was not morality. It was the slow death of the human spirit. The will to power demands creation, not obedience. It calls us to sculpt our own values, not inherit them like hand-me-downs from a dead god. To live by the will to power is to reject the comforting illusion that life is fair or fixed. It is to stand in the storm of existence and declare, I will shape this chaos into form. I will carve my own purpose into the void. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the Übermensch, the overman, the one who transcends the herd. The Übermensch is not a ruler of others, but a ruler of himself. He creates his own values. He imposes his meaning on a meaningless universe. The will to power is the engine behind every act of creation. The artist painting the canvas, the scientist discovering truth, the athlete pushing beyond exhaustion. Each of them expresses the same primal will, to become more. It is not about happiness. Nietzsche had no interest in happiness. Man does not strive for happiness, he wrote. Only the Englishman does that. No, man strives for power, for growth, for mastery. The moments that define us are those of struggle, not comfort. It is the tension that makes us alive. To live without the will to power is to live without fire. It is to drift, to obey, to wait for meaning instead of forging it. The will to power demands that you stop waiting for permission to exist. It tells you, you are not here to be comfortable. You are here to create yourself. You are both the sculptor and the marble, both the artist and the clay. Every decision, every act of courage, every defiance against despair, all of it is an expression of this will. Nietzsche saw the will to power as the hidden truth beneath every philosophy, every religion, every moral code. Even those who claim to deny power, he said, are secretly seeking it. The priest who preaches humility gains power over the flock. The moralist who condemns pride wields power through guilt. The weak invent moral systems not to elevate life, but to restrain those who threaten their fragile comfort. Power hides even in piety. The will to power moves through all things, even denial itself. When Nietzsche said God is dead, he was not celebrating atheism. He was warning humanity of what comes next. Without God, the old values collapse. The meaning that once gave structure to our lives dissolves into nothingness, but that nothingness is also freedom. A terrifying, beautiful freedom. In that abyss, the will to power becomes your only compass. It is the force that allows you to build meaning out of the ruins of old faith. It whispers, if no one gives you purpose, create your own. The will to power is not a philosophy for the timid. It demands that you embrace suffering, not escape it, that you use pain as material for strength. Nietzsche believed that all greatness is born in struggle, that the higher we rise, the deeper our roots must go into darkness. What does not kill me makes me stronger, he wrote, not as a cliché but as a metaphysical truth. Suffering, resistance, loss, they are not curses. They are the forge in which power is born. To live with the will to power is to live dangerously. It means to reject the easy path, the soft life, the endless search for comfort. It means to climb mountains simply because they exist. It means to risk yourself in pursuit of something higher, not because you are guaranteed success, but because you refuse to live half alive. Nietzsche wrote, "Build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius." He meant, live so fully that even the volcano's fire cannot scare you. The will to power is the rhythm of existence itself. Every atom strives to expand its influence. Every living thing asserts its form upon chaos. Even decay is not death. It is transformation, energy rearranged, power-shifting form. Nietzsche saw the universe as an endless dance of forces, eternally struggling, eternally becoming. There is no final peace, no ultimate rest. There is only the eternal struggle of power becoming power, again and again, forever. That is why Nietzsche despised nihilism, the belief that life has no meaning. For him, the will to power is the antidote to nihilism. Meaning is not given. It is created. The moment you stop creating, the moment you surrender to despair, you deny life itself. To live is to impose meaning, to carve purpose out of chaos, to wrestle existence into form. When Nietzsche said, become who you are, he meant, let your will to power express itself fully and until nothing false remains. The will to power is not a theory to be studied. It is a mirror held to your soul. It reveals the truth of what drives you, beneath the layers of civility and moral disguise. Every desire, every ambition, every emotion, even love itself, all are expressions of this deeper will. We do not seek wealth or fame for their own sake. We seek them because they make us feel strong. Even compassion, Nietzsche would say, is often a form of strength, the power to give, to uplift, to shape another's fate. What matters is not the act, but the force that animates it. In Nietzsche's vision, human beings are not guided by reason, but by instincts, vast and primal forces that surge beneath the surface of consciousness. The mind is not the captain of the ship. It is the storyteller who justifies the direction the waves have already chosen. The will to power is that ocean current, unseen but irresistible. We dress it in noble words, in philosophies and faiths, but beneath every mask is the same face, the will to grow, to influence, to matter. Nietzsche rejected the idea that survival was the highest goal of life. To merely survive is to stagnate. Every living thing strives not for safety, but for expansion. The plant does not stop at the surface of the soil. It breaks through into light. The artist does not stop at imitation. He demands creation. Even the weakest life forms seek to assert themselves, to reproduce, to spread their being into the world. Survival is the foundation, not the summit. The summit is creation, transformation, transcendence. He once said, "Where I found a living thing, there I found will to power." This was not poetry, it was ontology. Existence itself, Nietzsche believed, is a struggle of forces, not a harmony of beings. The universe is not a machine built for peace, but a storm of wills colliding, merging, destroying, and rebirthing. In this storm, morality, truth, and beauty are not eternal law. They are human interpretations of chaos. The one who understands this does not hide from it. He learns to dance within it. Nietzsche saw in human psychology a constant war, not between good and evil, but between strength and weakness. Every human soul contains both, the noble impulse to rise and create and the fearful impulse to submit and obey. The weak seek peace through control, morality, and conformity. The strong seek peace through mastery. Mastery of self, mastery of chaos, mastery of existence. The will to power is not cruelty. It is the courage to face the world without illusions. This is why Nietzsche admired creators, warriors, and artists. Those who live dangerously, who shape new values instead of inheriting them. He saw in them the living expression of the will to power, the energy to transform suffering into meaning, chaos into beauty. The artist for Nietzsche was not an entertainer but a conqueror. one who transforms pain into form. One must still have chaos within, he wrote, to give birth to a dancing star. That star is the light of creation born from darkness. Nietzsche believed that every philosophy, every religion, is born from the psychological expression of its creator's will. Plato's search for eternal forms, Schopenhauer's longing for peace, Christianity's worship of humility. Each is a reflection of a particular temperament, a particular will. Philosophy, he said, is not the pursuit of truth, but the autobiography of its thinker. There are no objective truths, only interpretations shaped by will. The question is not what is true, but who is strong enough to create truth. Here lies Nietzsche's rebellion against his teacher, Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer saw life as suffering, driven by a blind, aimless will to live, a force that dooms us to endless desire and disappointment. He urged resignation, compassion, and withdrawal from the world. Nietzsche, however, refused to kneel. Where Schopenhauer saw suffering as a curse, Nietzsche saw it as the raw material of greatness. The goal of life is not to escape pain, but to use it, to transmute it into power. Nietzsche's will to power transforms tragedy into fuel. It teaches that pain is not an obstacle. It is the path. The man who avoids pain avoids growth. The man who embraces it transforms himself. The stronger the will, the more it can bear. This is why Nietzsche admired figures like Beethoven, who turned the suffering of deafness into the fire of symphonies, or Dostoevsky, who transformed exile and despair into art that stared directly into the human abyss. Their genius was not comfort. It was power forged in agony. In modern terms, we might call this the psychology of transformation. Every trauma, every struggle, every failure carries within it the potential for growth. The will to power whispers, "Do not curse your wounds, use them." Every challenge is a chance to express strength. Every loss is an invitation to become something higher. Nietzsche would say that the greatest sin is not suffering, but weakness, the refusal to let suffering make you stronger. But the will to power does not only move through individuals, it shapes civilizations. History, Nietzsche believed, is not driven by progress or justice, but by competing wills. Nations, ideologies, and cultures fighting to impose their vision of truth upon the world. Empires rise and fall not because of fate, but because of strength or decay of will. Every great culture, he said, begins with creators, people strong enough to impose form on chaos, and ends when that vitality fades into comfort and conformity. When the will to power weakens, societies decay from within. They lose their hunger for greatness and replace it with moralism, bureaucracy, and equality. The herd becomes more powerful than the individual. In such times, Nietzsche said, the last man appears, a creature who no longer dreams, who only seeks comfort and safety. He is harmless, content, and empty. He is the end of history, not its triumph. The last man has killed his own fire and calls it peace. Nietzsche's words are a warning. If the will to power dies in a people, that civilization collapses, not from war, but from boredom. When life loses tension, it decays. When struggle disappears, so does strength. The will to power is the heartbeat of culture, art, and spirit. Without it, everything becomes hollow. He wrote, "Man is something that must be overcome." This is not a rejection of humanity, but an invitation to evolution. The will to power is the bridge between what you are and what you could become. The Overman, the Übermensch, is not a future species. It is the potential within each individual who dares to live beyond fear, beyond morality, beyond the herd. It is the one who takes the raw chaos of life and sculpts it into form, his own form. Nietzsche did not see the will to power as a doctrine to follow, but as a mirror to awaken. It reveals what already burns inside you. The question is not whether you have the will to power. You do. The question is, how will you express it? Will you bury it under comfort, guilt, and fear? Or will you let it rise, dangerous, creative, divine? Every time you silence your ambition, every time you settle for less than what your soul demands, you betray the will to power within you. But every time you defy weakness, every time you create something beautiful out of chaos, you become more real, more alive. The will to power is not something to be acquired. It is something to be remembered. It is your origin, your nature, your destiny. There is a secret hidden inside Nietzsche's philosophy. a truth so vast and unsettling that few ever dare to look directly at it. He called it the eternal return. Imagine that every moment of your life, every joy, every mistake, every tear, every victory, would return again and again, endlessly through eternity. That there is no escape, no final redemption, no afterlife to balance the scales. Only this life, repeated forever. To Nietzsche, this was not a doctrine of despair but a test of strength. He asked, could you live as though every moment were eternal? Could you affirm your existence so completely that you would will it to repeat endlessly? This question cuts to the very heart of the will to power. For if you can say yes to the eternal return, yes to pain, yes to struggle, yes to imperfection, then you have transcended weakness. You have become powerful enough to love life as it is. The will to power is not content with endurance. It seeks affirmation. It is not enough to survive the storm. You must learn to dance in it. Nietzsche's eternal return is the ultimate affirmation of life, the purest expression of power. To say yes to existence, even in its darkest form, is to conquer it. To reject nothing, to embrace everything, to say it was necessary. This is strength beyond morality. This is the will that creates gods. Most people flee from such a vision. They want meaning guaranteed, happiness ensured, suffering erased. They want a universe that promises reward for goodness and punishment for evil. But Nietzsche saw that this longing for justice, for cosmic fairness, is another disguise for weakness, a refusal to face reality as it is. The will to power does not ask for fairness. It demands freedom. And freedom means standing alone in a world without guarantees, and still saying yes. This is why Nietzsche called his philosophy a Dionysian one, after Dionysus, the god of chaos, creation, and ecstasy. Where the old philosophers sought order and perfection, Nietzsche embraced contradiction and becoming. He saw existence as a festival of transformation, not a machine of reason. To live is to dance on the edge of chaos, to embrace both creation and destruction as parts of the same eternal rhythm. The will to power is the music of that dance. Every truth, every belief, every ideal, Nietzsche saw them not as eternal facts, but as creations of will. The strong create truth, the weak inherit it. The strong see the world as clay, to be shaped by imagination and force. The weak see it as a prison, and call their resignation faith. Truth for Nietzsche was never objective. It was the most powerful interpretation. Those who possess the greatest strength of vision impose their meaning upon the world. This is why Nietzsche wrote, "There are no facts, only interpretations," not as a denial of reality, but as a declaration of creative freedom. The will to power transforms even truth itself into a weapon of becoming. It tells you that nothing is fixed. Not morality, not destiny, not even the self. You are not a static being. You are a storm of becoming. Your task is not to discover who you are, but to create it again and again, without end. Nietzsche rejected the old metaphysical comfort that life was moving toward perfection, or that there was a final purpose. For him, existence has no end goal. It is pure movement, an eternal process of becoming. The universe does not aim at harmony. It is conflict. Power struggles against power, force against force, endlessly creating and destroying. There is no stillness. There is no peace. But within this chaos lies beauty, because it is alive. This was Nietzsche's metaphysical vision, that the universe itself is a living organism of wills, forces striving not for balance, but for intensity. The cosmos, he believed, is the will to power made manifest. Every explosion of stars, every evolution of life, every thought that burns through your mind, all of it is this same will expressing itself. The will to power is not a human trait. It is the heartbeat of existence itself. And yet Nietzsche's insight was not cold or cosmic. It was deeply personal. He wanted to awaken in each human being the recognition that this same power burns within them. You are not separate from the universe's will. You are it. When you create, when you fight, when you love, when you suffer, the same fire that drives galaxies moves through you. You are not a fragment of life. You are life asserting itself. But here lies the paradox. To embody the will to power, you must be willing to destroy even your own certainties. You must tear down your false beliefs, your moral comforts, your inherited truths, and again. The will to power is not a destination. It is an endless self-overcoming. You do not arrive. You become. To live this way is to accept eternal transformation, to burn and rebuild, to die and be reborn, every day. Nietzsche called this the path of the Creator. The Creator is one who loves the world enough to recreate it in his own image. He does not submit to meaning. He gives it. He does not bow before truth. He builds it. For Nietzsche, creation was the highest expression of power, not destruction, but the power to bring something new into existence. That is the divine act, the essence of life's will. The will to power is not cruel, though it can appear that way. It is not about domination. It is about affirmation. To say yes to existence, even when it breaks you, even when it burns you, that is the highest strength. The weak demand that life justify itself. The strong justify life by their very living. This, Nietzsche said, is the greatest act of love, amor fati, love of one's fate. To not merely endure what happens, but to love it. When you embrace amor fati, you stop asking, why me? And start saying, let it be so. Every hardship becomes fuel. Every obstacle becomes form. You begin to see life not as something that happens to you, but as something that happens through you. This is the spiritual core of the will to power. Not resistance to life, but total participation in it. Imagine living with such a will, one that welcomes even tragedy as part of its creation. Imagine walking into pain and saying, this too is mine. That is what Nietzsche meant when he said, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. This is not blind optimism. It is the deepest courage. The courage to affirm the totality of existence. Nietzsche's will to power and his eternal return are two sides of the same vision. Life as an eternal dance of becoming. There is no ultimate victory, no final peace, and only the infinite repetition of creation. But for Nietzsche, that repetition is not a curse. It is the proof that existence is worth saying yes to. The question is not whether life has meaning, but whether you have the strength to give it meaning. Nietzsche's will to power does not merely describe the human desire to rule or conquer others. It is something much deeper, much older, and far more cosmic. It is the engine of life itself, the very current that surges through every form of existence. In Nietzsche's view, every being, from the smallest atom to the most complex mind, strives not for mere survival, but for expression, growth, and dominance. Survival, he argued, is only a side effect and the minimum condition of life. The true goal of life is expansion, creation, transformation. And yet this truth terrifies most people. Because if life is driven by will, not by moral order, not by divine plan, then everything sacred collapses. There is no higher hand guiding the world toward goodness or justice. There is only force meeting force, will colliding with will, the eternal storm of becoming. It is a terrifying vision, but also a liberating one, for in that chaos, Nietzsche saw the opportunity for greatness. To live according to the will to power is to reject passivity, to abandon the false comfort of certainty. It is to face the abyss and say, I will create my own order. I will carve my own values into existence. For Nietzsche, this was not arrogance, and it was authenticity. Because if no one gives your life meaning, then the only honest act left is to create meaning yourself. That is the essence of his thought. Not despair, not nihilism, but a fierce, defiant affirmation of life. But to reach that point, to truly live by the will to power, one must first confront what Nietzsche called the death of God. When Nietzsche declared, God is dead, he wasn't speaking about theology. He was describing a psychological collapse, the collapse of all external sources of truth. For centuries, human beings relied on religion, morality, and authority to give them purpose. But as reason advanced and faith weakened, the old foundations began to crumble. Humanity suddenly found itself standing in the ruins of its own beliefs, lost, hollow, searching. Nietzsche saw this coming long before it was fashionable to question faith. He knew that once God was gone, man would drift. He would invent substitutes, money, science, politics, ideology, but none would satisfy the deep hunger for meaning. Without something to believe in, man would become empty, a creature of comfort without courage or purpose. Nietzsche called this creature the last man, the opposite of the creator, the opposite of the Übermensch. The last man seeks only safety, pleasure, and ease. He avoids struggle, avoids pain, avoids greatness. He believes himself civilized, but Nietzsche saw him as a tragedy. Because comfort, Nietzsche said, is the enemy of life. It dulls the edge of will. It makes man tame. The will to power demands struggle, resistance, friction, because only through resistance does will sharpen itself. Only through suffering does strength emerge. Just as a flame grows stronger in the wind, the human spirit expands when tested. That is the true alchemy of existence. And so Nietzsche turned his gaze toward those who still dared to fight, the ones who refused to sink into mediocrity. He wrote not for the herd, but for the creators, the ones who could endure the collapse of old values and build new ones from their ashes. These, he believed, were the future humans, the ones who would redefine what it means to live. They would no longer obey, they would command. No longer follow, they would lead. No longer inherit meaning, they would forge it. To embody the will to power, Nietzsche said, is to become a self-legislator, a creator of values. It means taking the chaos of existence and shaping it with your own spirit, not to dominate others, but to master yourself. To turn every pain, every fear, every failure into raw material for transformation. This is what Nietzsche called the transmutation of suffering, the art of turning darkness into power. He admired the ancient Greeks, not because they were moral, but because they understood tragedy. They did not hide from the cruelty of existence, and they faced it and created beauty from it. Their art, their heroism, their myths, all were expressions of the will to power. They embraced the fact that life is both agony and ecstasy, destruction and creation, death and rebirth. For Nietzsche, to live well was not to escape the storm, but to dance within it. Every great creator, he said, has done exactly that. The artist, the philosopher, the warrior, the visionary, all are driven by the same primal force. They take what life gives, pain, chaos, resistance, and transform it into form, into order, into art. This, Nietzsche believed, is what separates greatness from mediocrity. Not luck, not intelligence, but the strength of will. The ability to impose form upon chaos, to say yes to life even when it burns you. In this way, the will to power is not cruel. It is creative. It is the force that builds civilizations, writes symphonies, discovers truth. Every invention, every revolution, every masterpiece, and all are the echoes of will made visible. The world, Nietzsche said, is not built from matter. It is built from will. The stronger your will, the more you shape reality. The weaker your will, the more you are shaped by reality. That is why Nietzsche despised pity. Not because he lacked compassion, but because pity, he believed, keeps people weak. It tells them they cannot rise. It teaches them to find virtue in suffering instead of power in overcoming it. Nietzsche's compassion was a harder, sharper kind, the compassion of truth. He believed the highest kindness was not to comfort people in their weakness, but to awaken them to their strength. So when Nietzsche speaks of power, he does not mean domination or control. He means the power to become, the power to shape your destiny, to impose your vision upon the world, to will your life into existence. This is not ego, it is evolution. The will to power is the same energy that drives stars to burn, oceans to rage, and minds to dream. It is life's eternal yes, Nietzsche wrote. What is good? All that heightens the feeling of power in man. To live nobly, then, is not to obey moral codes, but to live in such a way that your strength increases, that your courage grows, that your soul expands. The measure of a life is not comfort, but vitality. How much will can you bear? How much chaos can you shape? When the weak shrink from pain, the strong absorb it. They turn their suffering into fuel. Every disappointment becomes a lesson, every failure a new form of clarity. For Nietzsche, this was the greatest secret of existence, that every obstacle is an invitation to rise higher. The will to power is not crushed by resistance. It is defined by it,